Penguin Random House Audio presents Memories of Distant Mountains, Illustrated Notebooks, 2009 to 2022, by Orhan Pamuk, translated from the Turkish by Ekin Oklap, read for you by Tolga Seyfer. Note to listeners, this program includes a bonus PDF of the illustrations from the book. As a visual memoir, the listening experience will benefit from having the digital art component to reference. Each journal spread corresponds to the number read in the audiobook. If you are able to do so, we encourage you to view the bonus PDF. To Aslı. Chronology 2009 to 2022. 2009. In January, Pamuk began working on the Museum of Innocence with the German architect Gregor Sunderplasman. In February, he travelled to Goa, India with his girlfriend Kiran Desai, where he started to write A Strangeness in My Mind. In March, he was awarded an honorary doctorate in Rouen, the city of Gustave Flaubert, and wrote a piece on Flaubert. In April, he contributed a foreword to Ara Güler's book, Ara Güler's Istanbul, 40 Years of Photographs. In May, he visited Spain and the Alhambra and later taught a class on comparative literature at the Ca' Foscari University of Venice. Between June and September, he worked on the displays for the Museum of Innocence. In October, he went to Harvard to deliver the Norton Lectures, which were later published as a book under the title The Naive and the Sentimental Novelist. 2010. In January, he gave a speech on the future of museums and novels in Berlin and delivered the same lecture at the Center for Contemporary Culture in Barcelona. In February, he swam in the sea in Goa and continued to work on A Strangeness in My Mind. March, travelled to Egypt, Cairo, Alexandria. May, a trip to Albania. Aside from a brief holiday in Greece, his summer was spent working on the Museum of Innocence and writing A Strangeness in My Mind. In autumn, he taught for another term at Columbia University. 2011. In February and March, he was in Goa, where in the morning he worked on A Strangeness in My Mind, and in the evening he followed the events of the Arab Spring on TV. The uprisings led him to think about nights of plague. In April, he purchased his first ever touchscreen mobile phone. In spring, he travelled to Bulgaria and Italy to give some talks. He spent the summer putting together the displays for the Museum of Innocence and writing A Strangeness in My Mind. Returning in September to teach comparative literature at Columbia, where he held a professorship, he revisited his novel, The Silent House. The Museum of Innocence was completed that summer, but hadn't opened yet, and Pamuk reached an agreement with the American art books publisher Abrams for the publication of its catalogue, which was to be entitled The Innocence of Objects. He went to Brazil, Argentina, and Chile for a book tour. In December, near the end of this trip, he broke up with his girlfriend, Kiran Desai. 2012. In March, he attended his sister Humaira Pamuk's wedding in Dubai. In April, the Museum of Innocence finally opened to the public. 16 years had passed from the moment he first conceived the project to its opening. Around this time, Pamuk also published his modest manifesto for museums, which came to be widely taught in museum studies classes. He spent the rest of the year writing A Strangeness in My Mind and teaching at Columbia University in autumn. In the summer, he began a relationship with Aslı Akyavaş, whom he married 10 years later. 2013. Working to complete A Strangeness in My Mind, he continued interviewing street vendors and roaming around Istanbul's remotest neighbourhoods. He was at the Venice Biennale when the Gezi Park protests erupted and wrote a piece criticising the government's authoritarian and draconian response. And in September, he travelled to the town of Imrenler, where the yogurt-selling protagonist of A Strangeness in My Mind grew up, near Lake Beyşehir in Konya province, and visited the local coffee houses to hear the reminiscences of retired Istanbul yogurt sellers who had returned to this town and their ancestral villages. Later in autumn, he gave a talk in New York to mark the 150th birthday of Konstantin Cavafy. 2014. Pamuk wrote a piece on small museums for the New York Times. He travelled to Georgia, the UK, and Spain to give talks and promote his books. In April, he taught at the University of Bologna with Umberto Eco for a week. In May, he travelled to Tallinn, Estonia, to receive the prize that the European Museum Forum had awarded to the Museum of Innocence. Afterward, he visited Anselm Kiefer's large studio on the outskirts of Paris and wrote a piece about it for The Guardian a year later. He also collaborated with the documentary film director Grant G. on a film entitled The Innocence of Memories. He travelled to Lisbon with Aslı Akyavaş, where he received the Helena Vaz da Silva Prize for the dissemination of cultural heritage. In September, he finished A Strangeness in My Mind while at Columbia, and the novel was published in Turkey in December. 2015. He began writing his new novel, The Red-Haired Woman, Trip to Bursa in February, Death of Yaşar Kemal. The Museum of Innocence hosted an exhibition for the Istanbul Biennale, curated by Karolin Krzysztof Bakajev. Some notebooks containing paintings by Pamuk were displayed for the first time. He attended the Venice Film Festival to help promote Grant G's film on Istanbul and the Museum of Innocence, The Innocence of Memories. He embarked on a book tour of the United States for the launch of the English-language edition of A Strangeness in My Mind. 2016. At the start of January, Pamuk travelled to London to set up replicas of 13 displays from the Museum of Innocence at the Courtauld Gallery in Somerset House. At the end of the month, he published his 10th novel, The Red-Haired Woman. He visited Paris for the screening of Grant G's Innocence of Memories at the Centre Pompidou. Trip to Toledo, Spain. He was on the island of Buyukada writing Nights of Plague during the attempted coup of the 15th of July and followed the developments on TV with Aslı Akyavaş. 2017. Blandine Savage's stage adaptation of Snow was performed in Strasbourg. In February, Pamuk received an honorary doctorate from the University of St. Petersburg, and afterward he visited Tolstoy's house and grave in Yasnaya Polyana. The Museum of Innocence's display cabinets were exhibited in the Historical Museum in Oslo, and Pamuk attended the opening of the exhibition in May. Throughout the summer, he continued to write Nights of Plague. He travelled to Sicily with Aslı to receive the prize named after the celebrated writer Giuseppe Tomasi da Lampedusa. After teaching at Columbia in autumn, he delivered a speech in Istanbul at the inauguration of the Tanpınar Center. 2018. January saw the opening of an exhibition consisting of displays from the Museum of Innocence in the Bugatti Valsecchi Museum in Milan. At the start of May, Pamuk was awarded an honorary doctorate by the University of Crete. This trip to Crete played a part in the shaping of Nights of Plague and the island of Mingeria. Toward the end of May, he travelled to Warsaw. He visited Auschwitz and felt ashamed of his own humanity. In early June, he went to Kaş, where he continued writing Nights of Plague while looking out at a view of Castellorizo, the island that inspired Mingeria. Autumn saw the publication of Balkon, his first book of photographs. While he was in New York teaching at Columbia, he made a trip to Helsinki to promote The Red-Haired Woman. 2019. Pamuk took long nighttime walks in Istanbul to prepare his second book of photographs, Orange. In June, he went to Sarajevo to watch the stage adaptation of Snow. He continued to write Nights of Plague in Istanbul and New York. In November, he set off with Aslı on a trip to Peru. Once a week, on Thursdays, he went to paint at his friend Inci Eviner's studio.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?